I will make a start. So thank you very much for signing up for this webinar. It's absolutely wonderful to see you all here. I know we've got people logging in from all over the world, so thank you for making the time, whatever time in the world it is for you. In terms of this presentation, I'd like to think I can get through it in about 45 minutes, and then I would love to spend some time, talking with you and, answering any questions and just discussing the kind of overall approach of utilizing AI and large language models in talent and learning. So very much hoping to be able to make that session and look forward to discussing any thoughts you might have with regards to AI automation and the talent and learning space. So let me start off by just quickly introducing myself. My name is Juliette Denny. I have been in the learning technology space for what feels like an eternity, but not really, because I have enjoyed and loved every minute of it. So previously, I had the honor and pleasure of working with the team at Growth Engineering for the last sort of 20 years, and we have been delivering out our LMS and e-learning solutions to the likes of L'Oreal, Apple, Victoria's Secret, etc. Some of the biggest companies in the world, really enjoying taking them on a kind of voyage of discovery on how they can create highly engaging and very gamified learning experiences for their learners. And then more recently, I decided to bust out and take the bull by the horns and see if I could create something new in conjunction with my son Cosmo, trying to revolutionize learning with the power of AI and large language models. And so that's currently what we have been working on with our fantastic global team. So this is really what this is about. And again, I would love to hear your thoughts at the end of the presentation on what you think the future of AI and automation is. So without kind of further ado, let's just sort of focus our minds on really what is the challenge in today's learning and development and talent marketplace. I have spent a lot of time speaking to learning and development leaders from around the world, and I think it's fair to say that there is a sort of feeling that although there's been a lot of money poured into learning and talent solutions, the reality is that it maybe hasn't made the impact and hasn't delivered the clarity in terms of ROI and return on investment that we would really hope. And maybe that is down to the fact that the kind of one size fits all, it doesn't really meet modern learning and organizational requirements. So, there is a huge amount of change going on in the world in terms of AI and automation, and we really need better talent and learning solutions in order to help our people understand what is required of them in the future and what that means in terms of them upskilling, in terms of their talent and their learning, in order to provide value and really, feel like they have a place in tomorrow's future. And we believe fundamentally at Iridescent that the root cause of this is just a lack of personalization. It is very difficult to get people to meaningfully engage with their talent and learning if they don't know what it means to develop in the context of their role and their responsibility. So our belief is that the challenge really is, the background of the challenge is really that it is not individual enough in terms of the process of developing talent and learning. And so our approach has been to put the individual at the center of learning. So rather than focusing on content and pathways, it is about context. So it is less about creating new content and more about making sure that any content is contextualized according to that individual's role. So what we want to do is ensure that we have the attention and the concentration from that individual, because the learning is only about them and their role, right? So that is the approach, and that is what we are driving towards. This idea that we are putting the learner at the center, not the content. So it's not about the message, it's about how that message reaches the learner. And this is a fundamental kind of flip on what, content has been, in the past. So we're really trying to have that very, very hyper personalized relationship with the learner. That means that it's contextualized around the learner in terms of their role, in terms of how they like to learn, when they like to learn, and also the learning is of value to the learner. So it is directly mapped to standards that are transportable. They understand what their career pathway looks like in the future, and any learning that they do is mapped to national qualifications. So there's no more kind of generic, yeah, I studied that at Google, or yes, I did that at AWS, or yes, it is actually something that is recognized by national and international governments. And the next thing is that there is real-time adaptation of their talent development and the content in terms of how that learner is feeling at the time. So Zavmo has the ability to use some of the neuroscience that it's based on in order to real-time adapt the messages and the way it's delivering out that content and that training. So the key thing is where we are today is that we are obviously in a situation where the world is, seismic changes in terms of automation and AI. And this is having a massive impact on where organizations are beginning to understand how their future will be. So it's clear that, there will be disruption from AI and automation. The question is how it impacts individual organizations. And so this question of the skills gap is becoming more and more painful for organizations. How do we understand what the skills gap is? How do we benchmark our people? How do we understand and give our people a really, really clear understanding of what they need to do tomorrow, next week, next month, next year in order to add value? So that question is, really coming up in terms of boardrooms and in terms of, line managers. And the reality is that most companies now are realizing, and you can see it, in the research, that there is a real gap between where they know they need to be, what they understand their talent to be, and how future prepared their workforce is for the future. And you can see that in, mission statements, vision statements, and sort of desired behaviors of large corporates changing, because they know that there is a huge amount of adaptation that is needed for their workforce to go through in order to change and, drive that efficiency and effectiveness, to result in innovation and growth. So those are beginning to be sort of core questions, that we are seeing, in the marketplace. And why is that? Well, I mean, the feedback that we're hearing is that one of the real problems, starts from the fact that there might not be a consistent understanding of job descriptions and roles. So lots of large companies that, we speak to, different departments have different JDs. And this is obviously a real problem. Some of those JDs may or may not include, OKRs, KPIs, and, clear objectives. So from the get-go, that is obviously, an issue. And primarily, one of the reasons for that is the systems that we've been used to manage these processes isn't necessarily as smart as some of the AI systems that, will be available soon and are available on Zavmo. The second issue is even if your JDs are consistent across, thousands and thousands of, colleagues, the reality is you probably don't have a common competency model between all of the different departments that allows for passportability between different departments. And so that passportability obviously affects people's ability to drive innovation, because they don't know of the opportunities that their skill set may have in departments that are similar but not exactly the same. And so what we get quite a static organization where talent isn't moving around our organization, and because of that stops innovation. The other thing is that we've got a situation that there may not be a common understanding of what skills are needed in terms of foundational, functional, and future skills. So there isn't a common understanding of what skills are required in terms of, those three types of skills. And that does make it difficult to understand what value that you as an individual or teams as a whole are actually providing with regards to those future skills. And then the other thing is that there is lower engagement. So the problem comes is that if people do not have that feeling of a golden cord, i.e. I know where I'm going and what I've got to do to add value to this organization, their mindset drops out. So their mindset is one of, I don't know what I should be doing. I don't know what the future will bring. So therefore, I am going to select not to have a growth mindset with regards to, grabbing future skills. And so as much as they might care about their career, as much as they might, really want to have a situation where they want to develop and, move forward, the reality is they don't know how. And this is the biggest part of motivation and, ensuring that people are curious to learn. So a growth mindset is something that most people, would love to have, but if they are scared and they don't know where and how, the reality is it's very difficult to adopt a growth mindset. You need to be in a confident place in order to, develop a growth mindset. And you can really see this in terms of, polls, in terms of how individual functions and broader companies are feeling with regards to, AI and automation. People are feeling overwhelmed. They are, specifically in terms of first world countries, they're feeling exhausted after COVID. They're feeling overwhelmed in terms of where they need to go in their development. And they need something that is much more personalized in order to feel enthusiastic and excited about their own personal development. And this is what is causing a lot of mental health challenges in the workplace. People are feeling overwhelmed because they just don't know what to do tomorrow, next week, in order to ensure that they are providing value. And from that, it is raising their own self-esteem. So this is something that we need to start talking about, because it's going to be a more and more of an issue for companies and managers, alike. And particularly for us involved in an L&D context, we are responsible for this. We are responsible for making sure that we have golden cords for each individual person, so that they know they are valued and they will be carried, with this seismic change through, in order to drive innovation and, value for themselves and the organization. So this is not only a cost for the organization, it's also a cost for individuals and kind of mental health. So if you think about what it must feel like to know change is coming, but not know what to do about it, this illustration of the iceberg gives that kind of sense of where a lot of individuals' mindsets are with regards to, the future. They know they need to take on, automation, AI skills, but they don't necessarily know how. They know their organizations are going to have to change in terms of moving towards, deploying more AI and automation. But again, they don't know what that means for their roles. They know that, they need to upskill, but they don't necessarily know what that means for their day-to-day roles. And this is what the biggest challenge that we need to overcome. So now, you're probably all sitting there, with a sense of, I absolutely know that feeling. I absolutely know that I have that wealth of responsibility. And I absolutely, now, what are we going to do about it? Well, this is basically what, the team at Iridescent, are working on. And this is, now you kind of can understand where we're coming from. Hopefully you can understand why we're driving so hard for this new way of approaching talent and learning. So first of all, we've obviously got this incredible, technology that's come into the market in terms of large language models. And, it has been a real wonderful thing, and particularly creative, for me, who's been in technology for the last all my career, to just see the really, wonderful effects of working with a large language model. They really are beautiful things. And, it really does create a whole cornucopia, a whole new world of things that, that can be developed. So what we're working on is a new way of understanding talent and learning, and that really is at the bottom line of ZavmoAI. What we want to do is put the learner at the forefront and the only real thing that this platform is concerned about. So it is all about kind of dynamic knowledge mapping, constantly allowing the platform to change and pivot according to what the learner wants and needs, according to get the learner to really be the best version of themselves. Okay, so AI and large language models and large data sets are at the service of humans. Okay, everything they can do, all of their power and their interest is literally focused on getting that human to be their best version at work, to bringing that most confident person, you know, to the forefront at work every single day, to drive innovation, to drive, you know, an excitement and a passion and enthusiasm for work. That's really what Zavmo is. And in order to do that, the core thing is it's personalized. The core thing is that everything Zavmo does is in the service of that human. So personalized learning pathways, personalized data analysis that is constantly coming back to the individual to say, look, this is what you're thinking, this is what you're doing. When you're interacting with Zavmo, when you are having conversations with Zavmo, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a growth mindset. I'm seeing leadership capabilities in the area of knowledge. I'm seeing et cetera, right? So the learner is getting firsthand understanding of how their behavior is actually, you know, giving rise to, you know, through new knowledge, is actually pivoting and being able to be applied. So that is really what Zavmo looks like in terms of the, you know, the learner. And through putting the learner at the core and through giving the learner real-time cognitive feedback in terms of what that learner is doing, right, on the platform, we are able to help learners understand how they learn and pivot quicker and better, right? So this is really the difference. And so the big question is, you know, I'm sure you're all wondering, well, that's great, but how do you actually do that? Well, the beauty of, you know, this new technology is that we can do that through having dynamic knowledge graphs. So there's a vector databases looking at data in a fundamentally different way, deploying adaptive algorithms through large language models, looking at natural language processing. So Zavmo being able to pivot and to respond to learners in a way that is right for the learner. So contextualizing the information that is that basically is the bedrock. So the bedrock of quality, but the way that information is interpreted and basically delivered to the learner is obviously directly personal, and we can do that through large natural language processing. The next thing is a self-improving learning layer. So this self-improving learning layer ensures that Zavmo is constantly checking back to the learner to say, hey, how am I doing? What can I do better in order to make you more excited and delighted about the learning that you're doing? So the self-learning layer sits on top of the conversational layer in order for Zavmo to consistently personalize, not only at an individual layer, but also at a team layer, right? So if there is a department, for example, that, you know, doesn't want, you know, it doesn't want to be taught in quite the same way. So let's say a compliance department versus a sales department might require a different, you know, way of speaking. And so, you know, the self-improving layer allows that kind of nuance between individuals, team, and organization as a whole. The other thing is that when you look at Zavmo, it's important to understand that Zavmo is absolutely not a, you know, just an LLM. So it's not about dragging in, you know, a large language model into your organization. It's about creating your own talent and learning AI, which is specific to you. And how we do that is by customizing the data lake. So this is the customization of what information goes into your data pool in order to anchor the Zavmo and the large language model on top of that, so that it doesn't hallucinate, so it doesn't do anything that you don't want it to do. So it is, you are working with your own AI in order to create something that is personalized and customized to your organization, right? And, you know, the next thing that is obviously, for those of you who have been spending time, and I know many of you on the call will have, with this wonderful thing called, you know, AI and large language models, they are incredibly powerful. And so what we have to ensure is that we are adhering to best practice. And this is why at Iridescent, we are so focused on our ISO 42001 certification, which really does give real clarity, visibility, and transparency of how the AI is operating. So, you know, the danger in AI comes when humans do not have transparency over all the different layers of how that AI is being architected. So our responsibility as providers is to ensure that we are giving full transparency and reportability against what is going in the data lake, what's going in the prompt layer, and what is going on in terms of the self-learning layer broadly. A lot more complicated if you are a technical person, but you know, from a holistic point of view, we just need to get transparency. And of course, all of that is, you know, customizable to the individual organization. And the longer that, you know, you work with Zavmo, or an organization works with Zavmo, the better suited Zavmo becomes to your organization. So that's from an organizational point of view, but let's look at it from an individual point of view. So this all sounds really complicated, but from a learner point of view, what is the learner experiencing? Well, the wonderful thing about large language models, and I'm sure all of you on the call who use your Claudes and Geminis and OpenAIs, my favorite is Claude. I absolutely love Claude. I think I might be in some sort of relationship with Claude, to be honest with you, is the simplicity of the interface, right? We don't need to spend hours and hours and hours upskilling ourselves on how this system works. And this is exactly the way we have programmed Zavmo. So there is only 4 elements of Zavmo, all within one interface, okay? So it literally is, it looks like a chat interface. And I should say that after this presentation, if any of you want to explore Zavmo, please just, you know, reach out to us on, you know, LinkedIn or through this chat or whatever, and we would be delighted to get you a login so that you can have a really good play. So the first step in the Zavmo process is discovery. Okay, so Zavmo wants to understand who you are. So what, you know, what your name is, what your role is, how long you have been in that role, what type of company you work for. So this obviously isn't the version for, you know, let's say we were working with Centrica, which we have been. Obviously Zavmo would know if you were working for Centrica, but the demo version that you will all be getting access to, if you'd like it, asks you, you know, who you work for, what industry you're in, all of these types of things, to really get an understanding of where you are in your career ladder, what your career aspirations are, and how you like to learn. Okay, so this is not, do you like to learn via videos? It's more, do you like to learn through role play? Do you like to learn through case studies? Do you like to learn through Socratic dialogue? Do you like to learn, you know, through so how would you like Zavmo to interact with you, right? And then the other thing we're going to do is during this stage is we're going to do some personalized goal setting. So what do you want from your future? Then once Zavmo has got all the information Zavmo needs to understand, you know, you, your ambitions, your goals, then Zavmo is going to start discussing with you what that collaborative learning path looks like. Now, one of the problems is, for those of you like me who've been in this industry for a long time, learning is something that gets done to you, right? You're put in school, you're put on a, you know, a career development path, you're put on, you don't really get to discuss it a lot. You know, it's a one size fits all. You're going on this, you're going on that. We want to break that. So we want to make it a collaborative process. What I'm seeing from you, what I've heard from you, Zavmo is saying, is you are interested in the following. Am I right? Have I got too much of one thing or not enough of another? Here is also in the discussion phase where we're going back to the JD. So if it is within a corporate structure, what we'll be looking at is mapping training needs analysis to the job description. So we'll say, in your role, can we just go over the core competencies you need for your role to make sure that we're plugging any gaps, okay? So discovery is all about you. Discussion is all about your role and where you might need to be. So depending on what we're doing for the organization, and later I'll come to the Centrica case study, this is where the training needs analysis would be mapped against national competency or national competency framework. So after we've done the training needs analysis and we've understood, what your ambitions are, this is when we go into delivery. And this is when, when I'm talking to people and they're like, well, how does it create content? How does it do that? Well, Zavmo creates content by triangulating three core things. And those of you who are on the call who've been in learning and development and developing e-learning will know these three things. Very, very, very common things. So that is the learning objectives, the learning outcomes, and the assessment criteria. Okay, so because we have ingested huge libraries of national vocational and professional qualifications, okay, so pretty much if you want to be a nurse, if you want to do maths GCSEs, if you want to do leadership, if you want to do finance, if you want to do key account management, whatever you want to do, we have ingested those qualifications on a UK national level. And so what Zavmo does is Zavmo looks at the learning objectives, learning outcomes, assessment criteria, and your role, where you want to go, and creates content based on that. Okay, so there isn't magic, it's not creating content out of nothing. So one of the things that I think is particularly important about this stage is the quality of what Zavmo is delivering. So one of the things that used to be my bugbear is, companies saying, here, I'm going to give you some leadership training. And I'm like, well, that's great. But I mean, how do you know what good leadership looks like? Oh, I've just got this model, or I've got this. What learners want is they want learning that basically gives them something that is a transportable skill. And so this is why we have mapped everything to Ofqual, which is the UK awarding body that also works for many of the Commonwealth countries, but also EFQL, which is the European qualifications board as well. And if you look at the content within, Ofqual, you will find that, it is, very, very high quality learning objectives, learning outcomes, and assessment criteria. So that's what happens in the delivery stage, right? So Zavmo is speaking to you, and Zavmo is basically teaching you through mentoring conversations, through Socratic dialogue, through case studies, etc. That's all great. So you're having a conversation about that, but ultimately we need to meet the final criteria, which is the learning assessment. So do you know it? But here is where we really do deploy a lot of Bloom's taxonomy. So one of the things that you on the call will know from being in L&D is that it's all well and good people knowing things, but if they're not using it, if they're not applying it, this is the issue that we have. So what we want them to do is demonstrate it. So not demonstrate it as in terms of ticking a box, right? This isn't a quantitative experience. It is a qualitative experience. So we're trying to get people to really, really ensure that not only do they know it, but in a real sense, they know how, where, and what elements of that knowledge they would use to basically improve, those outcomes. So that is Zavmo's 4D process. It's very simple, but we believe it's very powerful. So one of the things that I think is really, really important with this new way of learning, so this adaptive, hyper-personalized learning, is that you are beginning, hopefully we will begin to see curiosity as a real driver. So before, learning and development departments and talent departments really struggled to get people curious, really struggled to get people to do their learning. Why? Because people fundamentally love to talk about themselves. They are, people are quite self-obsessed in a good way. I mean, if we weren't, then obviously we would expire, right? We have to be the center of our own universe, but a one size fits all just doesn't fit into that paradigm. Okay, so by having the learner at the heart of it, we are able to drive curiosity. Yeah, we are able to really get to know the individual, to really understand where we can support them, where Zavmo can support them in terms of that golden thread. Yeah, Zavmo is working with that individual through a deep understanding of what that individual's role is, what their future role is, and also how they like to learn, right? So it is very, very, it's a very interesting, and hopefully you guys will find out when you're talking to Zavmo, it is a very rewarding experience, because you're like, wow, I didn't, it's interesting to be in a world where they know, you know, your role. So everything that you're learning is of interest to you, because you've said that this is my goals, you've said that this is your role, and it's basically mapped to the future skills and the current skills that your role would need. The other thing is that, you know, it is can constantly be, you know, updated with things like future skills. And there's also things like adaptive techniques in there, not to maximize the concentration time, but to ensure effective learning. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that we are giving you the right type of learning to maximize that attention and maximize that concentration, but not overload you. And this is one of the core mental models or neuroscience models that we're looking at within Zavmo. And what we find is that if you go back to the studies in terms of maximizing curiosity, the impact of maximizing curiosity is basically more exploration from the learner point of view. So, you know, back when this study was done, so, you know, 34% increase in learning resource exploration, that wasn't really the idea of adaptive AI within the talent and learning space. But what we do know is that, you know, in terms of mentoring, in terms of coaching, in terms of if we can make it, you know, more curiosity creating, there is an increase in people wanting to explore more. We can also see that you want to get longer learning engagement, and we've certainly seen this with the work that we've been doing with Centrica on the pilot. The next thing is you know, more people are more self-motivated to basically follow up with more questions, because obviously the context is directly to do with their role and what they will be doing in the future. And so, of course, this idea of completion rates is people don't want to necessarily stop working with Zavmo, because they know that it will have a direct impact on their ability to do their job in the future, because the learning is directly relevant to their roles, responsibilities, KPIs, you know, and role objectives. So all of that is obviously a big transformation in the market. And one of the things that is I think is really, really important is when we're looking at ZavmoAI is to look at AI is wonderful. Large language models are wonderful. Vector databases are wonderful. AI itself is insane, okay? But the core, you know, value driver here is not the technology, but how we can utilize the technology in the area of neuroscience to create, you know, superhuman humans that can basically drive our organizations forwards, right? So what you will, you know, see in this presentation, and what you will see in terms of Iridescent Technology is that our foundations are very much in terms of the human is at the heart. So the first thing, you know, so I've just illustrated with this with a couple of models that we're using. The first thing is cognitive overload. So we know that the majority of people that are going into a learning situation, be that e-learning or be that in a classroom, they get cognitive overload. They don't have the ability to basically look at what they've learned and basically construct it in a way that it allows it to go from their short-term memory into their long-term memory. The next thing, you know, is Bloom's taxonomy. We have to stop creating learning interventions that are about receiving and about being tested. We need to move further up Bloom's taxonomy to get our learners to apply the knowledge. The next thing is that we all want, you know, learners that have a growth mindset, right? That really are compelled to continue that voyage of discovery about their own future and about what the impact of their role is on the organization. And I'm moving through these pretty fast, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the importance of the neuroscience behind ZavmoAI as opposed to the actual technology. The other thing that we need to do is we need to take constant feedback. So before we had this situation where we weren't really able to deploy the Kirkpatrick model in real time. So often the Kirkpatrick model was basically done after the learning intervention. And the problem is that that's not kind of seeking feedback at the point where the learner really can articulate if they feel like they're having a change of behavior. So the self-learning layer on Zavmo is integrated to the learning process, into the 4D process. The next thing we want to do is we want to let learners know what their learning agility is like. So what we find, going back to the beginning of the presentation, is people get locked up when they're scared, right? We know that. And what we've got to do is help them understand what mental agility and what learning agility looks like. So by tagging and flagging what's happening when they're learning with Zavmo, we can then begin to see, what their mental agility is like, what their people agility is like, and some of the reports we can get from Zavmo help them, identify, maybe I am a bit stuck, maybe I do need to move forward here. And if we can help them get unstuck, that's how we can really kind of push forward our organizations. And then, of course, what we want to do is make leaders. We want to create leaders, people that are not only have got learning agility, but they also have got that leadership agility, allowing them to drive innovation and change forward. So in terms of, what we have ingested into Zavmo currently, this is very much about looking at frameworks which are unrivaled in terms of their ability to hit national standards. So we're not interested in, we're interested in the biggest understanding of what good looks like in terms of standards, which is why we've chosen the National Occupational Standards, which is a UK and Europe-wide occupational standards. So they've mapped 60,000 roles within the UK. It covers, everything from police all the way through to, professional architects to, Reiki dog healing, to leadership, to technical roles, and so off the back of that, we have hundreds and thousands of jobs ranging from large corporates to medium corporates to, individual SMEs. So anybody coming into the Zavmo world basically can understand, what, not only what they should be doing in terms of a JD point of view. So this is the roles and responsibility of that job, the KPIs, how they're going to be measured, but also how that breaks down in terms of the competencies that are required for that structure. So within the National Occupational Standards, you have effectively kind of 1 to 7, but it's actually a 2 to 7 structure, which shows the seniority and the level of competency required for that particular competency. So that basically means that within a set of competencies, you've got future, foundational and functional different types of competencies, so that individuals can see how they can passport to other areas. And so this is why the broad spectrum of the National Occupational Standards is just so unbelievably powerful. The next thing we wanted obviously to embed is this qualifications framework. So these qualifications framework and the national standards and the JDs form the bedrock of why Zavmo doesn't hallucinate, because at all times Zavmo is anchored to this idea of what good looks like. And for each company, they can obviously ingest other types of data. So for example, building regulations, for example, industry regulations that might be pertinent to the energy sector or the insurance sector or whatever it might be. And then the other thing that we've managed to do, through, through, as far as I'm concerned, slight magic, this is our data science job, we have managed to do this automated mapping. So, elements that are going into the data lake are, mapped so that it is constantly dynamic and constantly learning. And so really what this ends up with is this wonderful kind of very, very personalized, learning experience. And I'm very much looking forward to sharing logins with you so that you can really kind of get an experience of what this is like, because it is, I wouldn't say addictive, but it does feel very supportive. It does feel like somebody's really interested in you and driving your career forward in a really kind of supportive way that really makes a lot of sense to you. So, you know, every time I go into Zavmo and I'm talking about my role and I'm talking about the challenges that I'm having in my role, it's so interesting the way it adapts my learning and the conversations that I have to really make me feel that when I end my session with Zavmo, I do have, there's always some value that I take away from it. And I'd be very interested in your feedback on there as well. So in terms of organizational impact, we've seen some great impact. And I will talk a bit about that with the Centrica case study. I'm going to move along because I do want to get some of your feedback. I would love to, you know, just speak to you for a little bit. So excuse me if I'm rattling through this, but it will be made available on the slides if you want to go back to the individual slides. So in terms of, you know, the skills assessment there, we're looking at third-party competency frameworks in order to map. We understand that if you don't know where you are now, it's very difficult to basically know where you're going. So the skills assessment is a very important part of the 4D process. And then, of course, the learning conversations, you know, are very supportive, and they can be, you can choose how you want to learn. So do you want to be coached? Do you want to be mentored? Do you want Zavmo to tell you stories? Do you want to do role play? And the great thing is as you're moving through this, so you can talk to Zavmo, you can listen to Zavmo, you can type to Zavmo, you obviously get that real-time feedback. And that is obviously really motivating from a learning point of view. And what this means in terms of organizational intelligence is really incredible. So if I move forward to the work that we are doing, and I'm going to do that pretty much straight away, the Centrica case study. So we have had the pleasure of working with our friends at Centrica on a pilot for Zavmo, really looking at how we can transform learning, talent and learning for Centrica. So Centrica is British Gas, so big energy company in a regulated industry. And what they were first looking to do is benchmark all of their people on the same competency framework. Now, NOS would be very difficult to work with if you didn't have AI, just because the scope of NOS is so massive that it would be a real struggle for any, you know, learning management system to actually ingest all of that and make it personal. So this is the first time that, you know, we could actually use something like the NOS database in order to make sense, you know, of those things. So the first problem they were trying to do is benchmarking. The second problem they were trying to solve is, you know, do people understand what they need to do every day? And the third thing we were trying to ensure is, you know, future preparedness. So looking at, you know, digital skills and future requirements for a future ready workforce. So what Centrica behind all of that were core behaviors. So they were looking, their core behaviors are a growth mindset. So do the team have a growth mindset? Do the team have a one team, so a one team approach? And do they take responsibility, right? So it's those three behaviors. And I think there's a lot of large companies that are looking at required behaviors in a similar sort of way, as if to say, hey, look, you know, this is a time of change. Everybody needs to be, you know, mentally agile and, you know, working together in order to drive, you know, efficiency and effectiveness. So really the outcome of the pilot is one that not only can you tell where people are kind of emotionally in terms of their journey with learning and development and talent, but you can also begin to see some really core differences between how different departments are thinking about, you know, their readiness for the future state, but also how the organization needs to prepare individuals and teams in order to, you know, ensure that they have that golden cord and that kind of common understanding of, you know, what the future looks like. So we have seen a dramatic reduction in time to competency. So this is basically people, you know, being onboarded, but also people just understanding the framework of what their future requirement is. Satisfaction rates have gone up, increases in internal mobility. So people actively looking for roles outside their department. and also, 100% compliance with those areas of the business that they have to be compliant with. So we're still moving through a lot of the things from the Centrica case study, but what is very, very clear is that if you look at the areas where they have been able to get a return on investment, it is everything from consistency in job descriptions, so a massive reduction in the cost of consistency of job descriptions, a big decrease in the cost of managing competency frameworks, a big increase in the amount of time that people want to learn. And of course, the output of that is obviously more efficient and effective. And I think motivated is one of the words that I would use. People are feeling a lot more positive about where they are in the organization and what is expected of them. So I'm going to just stop there. I've given 13 minutes, and I would absolutely love to get any feedback from anybody on the call or any questions that you guys have. Obviously, this is brand new bleeding edge technology, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are and what you think. Are there any thoughts? Anybody want to? I would love to hear from anyone if anybody has got any thoughts. Oh, Gerard, I knew you'd come to my rescue. I would love to hear. What is the question, Gerard? I can't hear you.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just wanted to echo that I have thoughts. So that's the start of it. Yeah, there's a whole lot of good things to say. I'm not going to do that. But one of the things I'm thinking about when you talk about NOS, which is I would say typically British, so to speak, and you refer to other systems like you have been finding in Europe or so. Does it mean if people have another system, although it is about standards, that you need to do a whole lot of extra work to make the system, make ZavMA work like it does work for Centrica?
Yeah, so I think our take on that would be what we would do is we would map competency systems before we started any kind of like data science work. So we would take the NOS standards so let's say a really good example of this would be in hospitality. So there is a set of NOS standards, National Occupational Standards, that cover hospitality. But one of the clients that we've had the privilege of working with in growth engineering is Mandarin Oriental. So they are above 5 stars. Yeah. And they use a set of hospitality standards, which, are in their view, they are the highest standards of hospitality.
Yeah.
So what we would do in that case is we would look at the NOS standards and we would look at the standards that Mandarin Oriental, and they have a license to use this set of standards. I believe it's called Forbes Hospitality Standards. Yeah. And we would map that simply first before we started messing around with ingesting another set of standards. We would look for discrepancy in those standards, and then we would only map the element of standards that went above or below the NOS standards. And that obviously makes it as efficient as possible, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to mess around with the entire model. You want to know the differences between one set of standards, the others. Yeah. So that would be our approach. But certainly as we move forward, we know there will be divergence of standards. So if you like, with NOS, we have almost done the one that covers the most industries and the most different professional qualifications, but might not cover the full gamut of standards. And so there has to be room for other sets of standards that organizations want to map to. The other thing
that makes it clear. That makes it clear because it says you have a picture, you have a solution, and because of that, you have a real sharp focus on what is different and can add that or distract it. So it's always kind of adaptive to the situation that you go into.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also the other thing is if you think about the different things that we're trying to balance. So, you know, we've got sort of, if you like, three core what can be described as databases, but they're not, because they're in the vector space. It's hyperdimensional. But so you've got one set of data which is in and around job descriptions. Then you've got a set of data which is in around standards, which is how you create the training needs analysis. And then you've got an area of data which is in and around frameworks of qualifications. So there is opportunity in all those three areas to customize for an organization. But the key thing is, are those three in place so that they constantly triangulate? Because there's no point in doing personalized learning when the individual is not clear what their JD is, because then what you get is you know, a situation where their training needs analysis is benchmarked on a set of competencies that might not be directly relevant to their role. So that triangulation provides the ultimate personalization. And of course, that is hard to get to. That is a huge amount of data science work. And this is why we've been, you know, it's taken us as long as it has to basically get those three elements. And of course, you know, in an organization, let's say like Centrica, you know, this change process is huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. So this idea of having consistent job descriptions, this idea of having, you know, consistency in terms of how people are going to be measured, how people are going to, you know, is the start point. So it's a very interesting time, I think, in learning and talent. But if you
can say not anything less than that, you know, it's probably the only way why we all on the call don't sleep anymore. It's too exciting. Well, thank you for that, Juliette.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for your questions. Is there anybody else on the call that has got any questions? I would be delighted to hear what anyone has got to say in terms of feedback. Very much appreciate any thoughts or anything. Okay, well, look, we would love to obviously offer you logins to Zavmo, so please do let us know if we can get you logins for Zavmo, and very much looking forward to catching up with any of you on future webinars. Please do join the rest of the series, and thank you very much for making the time for us. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Take care. Bye.